editing Natalie here. So I just noticed that I didn't do an intro for this video for some reason. So here I am in my sweats and no makeup. But welcome back to my channel. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Put Together Natalie. Enjoy. Alright, so today I wanted to go over 10 books that I either DNF'd or gave a very low rating to. Last week I posted about some of my favorite books of all time, but I also wanted to let you guys know a little bit of some books that I didn't like. That way you guys just get to know my reading taste a little bit more. I'm not going to go too in depth about these books. Usually with books I don't like, I often don't have too much to say, and also I don't want to like make this some sort of rant video. So I'm just gonna name the book and name a few reasons for why I did not like it. Alright, so I wanted to start with the books that I have physical copies of. I only have 4 books here that I have physical copies of that I didn't quite like. 2 of them are part of the same series, so they only count as one book on the list, and that is the second and third book for the Heart So Dark and Lonely series. I don't know if that's what the series is called, but that's the name of the first book. It's by Bridget Kemmerer. And these are Beauty and the Beast retellings. I actually quite enjoyed the first book. I really liked our main character Harper. I liked that she was very strong. I liked that she had disability rep. But in the second and third book, a new character called Liamara came onto the scene, and I just could not stand this character. She was a very weak and dependent character, and I felt she didn't have any character growth whatsoever. Whatever small amount of growth she had revolved around Gray, which meant that her growth revolved around a man. So it felt very much like the author was like, oh, we had a strong female in the first book, and now we're gonna do the complete opposite and put this really weak, doesn't know what she's doing character. And it was very frustrating. Every time I was with her, I was just like, why are we following this character? Why does she have all this power? It's clear she doesn't know what she's doing. So it was very frustrating to have such a weak female character in a YA book. Another part that I did not like in the third book, it's pretty short, and it has a lot of unfinished business by the end. When you finish this book, you're almost wondering like, wait, is there a fourth book? Because there's so much that does not get resolved in this book. So I don't know if the author has plans to return to the world. She must, because there's so many things she started that just weren't finished, and honestly a lot of those things didn't even need to be started. So it was a little confusing. The series started out strong, but it definitely went downhill. So that is my first book. This probably was the most frustrating. It also had a pregnancy in it, which for a YA I was like, no thank you. I don't want pregnancy in really any of my books, especially not YA. And I felt the pregnancy was very much for the benefit of just plot development, or like for one of the male characters' benefits. So it was really weird, and I didn't like it. So the next book I didn't like, I was really upset that I didn't like this. I actually ended up reading the second book as well, but that was available on Kindle Unlimited. As far as I know, all 3 books are available on Kindle Unlimited, but I bought the first one and read it and was left rather disappointed, and that is Lauren Lust by Carla Nicole. I believe this is self-published, and it's by a Black female author. It's about a Japanese vampire and a, is he Greek? I think he's Greek. So it's a male-male romance. I wanted to love this. I really did. I mean, the cover is stunning, which is, you know, one of the reasons that I picked it up. I figured, you know, vampires, it should be, you know, a cute, sexy time. But this just left a lot to be desired. I mean, there wasn't really much going on plot-wise. I did not really feel the connection between the two love interests, and that includes in the second book. And I just felt like there wasn't much happening in the story. I didn't really know what the purpose of the story was, because the romance didn't seem strong enough for it to be just a romance, but it also didn't have a strong enough plot for it to be like a fantasy romance or anything like that. So it was just lacking in all of the departments. In book 2, we end up following a second couple, a male and a female, and I honestly had no idea why we were with them. Every time they came up, and they were very prominent in the second book, I was like, no offense, but why are we here right now? So just a lot of decisions made in this book that I didn't agree with. I decided I'm not going to read the third book. I think that follows maybe even like a third couple, but I unfortunately don't care. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. Hopefully the author will write some more books. I think, you know, I think it's a debut for her maybe. So, you know, she can only go up from here, and I of course always want to support self-published and Black female authors. Alright, so the third book that I have physically, and the last one that I have physically, is A Deal with an Elf King by Elisekova. I recently finished this book, and it is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I started this book back in November of 2021. I read the first chapter and I put it down because I just wasn't feeling it. It does get a little bit better as you go through the story, but it starts out very weak. And it's once again one of those stories where you're kind of like reading along, and at one point you kind of stop and are like, wait, so what's happened so far? Kind of, you know, what have been the major plot points? And there weren't really any. There's not a lot that happens in this. Once again, the romance isn't very strong in this. I mean, it is a fantasy romance story, so the romance should be the focus, but the connection between the two, I just couldn't really connect to it. I didn't really feel it. And so this book was once again it was really bland. There was one character that I, for the most part, cared about, and I think his name was Horo, and that's his younger brother. So I kind of said in my review on Goodreads that if the author ever wrote a book about him, that I would possibly read it, but any other books in the series I'm completely uninterested in. It just was not giving what this cover would make you think it would give. Very disappointing. Right, so the next book we have is called The Love Interest. It's by Kale Dietrich. This was my worst book of 2021, my worst book of 2021. And it is a male romance, which it takes a lot for me not to like a male romance. So you have to know that this story just was not good. You don't need to pick it up. It was a very underwhelming story. It was very bland. We're following these two guys who were raised by an organization that trains you to be kind of like the perfect partner, so that one day if the organization sees someone that they want to have close contact with, they will send someone out to seduce that person, or I don't want to say like seduce, but make that person fall in love with them so that they can keep an eye on that person through their spouse who is technically working for them. So I think this is young adult. So there's these two guys, they go to high school to try and win the heart of this girl who I think is like incredibly intelligent. So this organization's like, she's going to invent something really great and we want to keep an eye on her. And the way it works, it's a little bit of a ridiculous idea, is that whichever one she doesn't choose, I think they get killed. Like they get killed. So it's very high stakes. But it never felt like high stakes. So this book, it was very blasé. At some point, the two guys like each other for some reason. I could not tell you why. The book was very anticlimactic. It was resolved very much based on like luck. You know, it was one of those things where like, would that ever work in the real world? You know, this giant organization that infiltrates, you know, all people all over the world, people in power all over the world, these teenagers can just win against them? I don't think so. So unfortunately that book was really disappointing. I know he has another book out that I'm actually somewhat interested in, so this is an author that I may give a second chance to, but as far as this book, you can definitely skip it. Alright, so the next book that I have is called The Monster of Eldon by Jennifer Gieschrich. I'm probably totally misremembering her name. I think this is one of those books that people either like really like or they really don't like. I don't know if it was maybe too abstract for me. I felt that I never quite knew what was going on. It was a very almost vague story. I didn't know what the purpose of the story was. I didn't really know what was driving our characters. I think it was supposed to be kind of almost a romance. It's I would definitely not categorize it as a romance. It is more towards horror, but it was just very strange and I felt very lost the whole time. The writing was interesting, so I can see how people would enjoy that, but for me it was like one of those books where it just gives you like a weird feeling when you're reading it, which, you know, it's kind of like that Limity Snicket kind of or vibe where you're kind of like, this is really kind of strange. I don't really know what's going on. It's a little spooky ooky, but I just couldn't connect to the characters. I couldn't connect to the story. I can definitely see why some people would like it. It's super short and, you know, you can get through it really quickly, but I honestly wouldn't have minded if it was longer, if it meant, you know, just expanding on the plot, on the world building, because, you know, it seems like they were in some sort of area that was very poor, very dirty, and I was like, okay, what's going on with this area? Because it seems like a lot of it revolves around the sickness that, you know, grows in this place. It seemed like the setting was rather important, and I never really got much from it. So the story definitely, in my opinion, needed just a bit more. Alright, so the next book is called Orphan Monster Spy by Matt Colleen. This was an audiobook that I listened to a little while ago. It's about a young Jewish girl who goes to like a boarding school where young girls in the Nazi party go to be trained to be good Nazi wives, I guess, and she's acting as a spy because she's trying to help this man find a weapon that I believe one of the girls' fathers is building. and I don't know, it's some sort of bomb. I don't think it's a nuclear bomb, but it's a very big, powerful bomb. I oftentimes don't like books that are set in like an isolated setting when big world events are happening. So we're just in this little boarding school with this girl and her teenage drama, and World War II is raging on, and I was like, no offense, I don't care about your teenage drama. So there's a war going on. It was a strange book where I felt almost like the victims of the war on both sides, because it does deal with some sexual assault of minors as well, were just not being given the respect that they deserve through the story. So it made me a little bit uncomfortable reading this, and I don't think I would recommend it. I don't think it has a very high rating on Goodreads either. So that honestly doesn't surprise me. Alright, and so for the last book that I actually completed, after this we have a couple books that I DNF'd that I want to talk about. But this is a book that I read all the way through. It's gonna be a little bit controversial. This is a well-beloved book. Like really well beloved. It's another World War II book. It's a book that I've heard a lot of people say got them into reading. It just didn't do it for me, and that is The Book Thief, written by Marcus Zusak. I started this book a couple times. I read it, I think, maybe when I was in middle school. I had brought it to Germany with me on a trip. This is actually kind of a funny story. And we were at the Schwimmbad, which is like an outdoor swimming area, and I went to go swimming. And someone stole it from me, you know, and let's be honest, they stole it because it was called The Book Thief, so they were like, you know, I can't just pass up on this opportunity, and I couldn't be mad about it, and honestly, I wasn't enjoying the story either way, so I didn't mind that it was taken. But then a few years later, I think it was last year I read it, I listened to the audiobook version of it. I was like, okay, we'll give it another shot because it's a well-beloved story, but I'm gonna listen to it as an audiobook and maybe I'll be able to get through it a little bit easier. Ooh. I found this book incredibly boring, to be honest. I know a lot of people feel that the fact that it's narrated by death is such a unique, cool aspect of the book, but I feel like it really didn't add anything to the book. Honestly, anyone could have been narrating this story. I mean, it could have just been some third random party for all that death was adding to it. I felt that the fact that it was called The Book Thief, that we would have gotten more of the book stealing. It seemed like it was a really small part of the story. Once again, it's kind of the same thing that was happening with the Orphan Spy Monster, whatever book that I was just talking about, where we're just in like this little tiny isolated place. We're following this one little girl and she's just going about her day-to-day activities while the war is raging on, and it's just not really for me. I think I just need a broader picture, you know, and I know some people really like just to find a moment within the chaos and follow it, but that just didn't work for me. I found myself incredibly bored. This book isn't short. I think it's relatively long, and so I'm just surprised by how much time we were able to spend with this family. I was incredibly glad when it was over, you know, one of those audiobooks where you look down and you see only have 30 minutes left and you're like, oh, thank God. It was just wasn't for me. And I know that I tried reading one of his other books at some point throughout my life, and I, you know, maybe got a couple chapters through it. So I think that his writing is just, it just isn't for me, unfortunately. All right, and now we have 3 books that I DNF'd. I don't DNF too often. It's not like these are the only 3 that I DNF'd, but there's some of the ones where I really went in expecting to kind of like them and was pretty disappointed. The first one is The Wrath in the Dawn by Ane Adare. I hope I say your name right. And this is a YA book. It's part of a duology. I think it's supposed to be based off of... It's not the Arabian Nights, is it? I don't remember what it's supposed to be based off of. But pretty much we have a prince, I think he's a prince, who takes a wife every night and then kills them. And we have a young girl whose friend was killed, and so she decides to volunteer so that she could kill him, which obviously doesn't happen. I at no point was expecting that she would kill him. That was not at all my expectation. I knew it was enemies to lovers, but I didn't even make it 100 pages into this book because the fact that only after a couple days she was like drooling over this guy's chest, and I was like, might I remind you that you're trying to get revenge for your friend who we know nothing about, so we have 0 connection to your friend. We don't care that she's dead, but I'm assuming you do maybe care that she's dead and want to kill the person that you blame, maybe, instead of ogling his chest. I don't know, maybe. So it was very infuriating how quickly she seemed to almost be abandoning the idea of killing him, how quickly she was becoming attracted to him. It's not as if they've been having any sort of deep conversations. It's not as if she knew, like, oh yeah, he has to kill them because there's some sort of curse and he's misunderstood. There's none of that. It was like purely like physical attraction, and I was like, physical attraction should not be strong enough to override the fact that you think that he is the killer of someone who's apparently very special to you. So I definitely think that moved way too fast. This is an author who wrote a duology that I really enjoy, The Flame and the Mist, so I will probably try her again in the future, but this, it was not it at all. No. No. Alright, and the second to last book was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I have not read any other books by him. I don't know if The Maidens is the only other one, but no one likes that book, so I see no need to try any of his other stuff. So I honestly went into this book thinking that Alex was a female author. So I started listening to the audiobook, and I very quickly, I think I only got 22% through this book, but even before then, realized that this was not a female author. You can tell that it's a male author. The male perspective is strong in this one. I was like, why are the women being portrayed this way? This is a little bit weird. Like, why is she writing them this way? And then I was like, wait a minute. And so I'm like, oh, let me look it up. And I was like, yeah, the author's a dude. The author's a dude. And I think that's just the main reason I just couldn't continue with this story. It's not the first time where I've read a book that includes females or a female perspective, and it's very obvious that it's not written by a woman, which I have a problem with. Yeah, I'm not gonna read that. I'm just gonna read a book by a woman. Later on, I kind of listened to how the book ended, and I have to say, I don't think I was missing out. It sounded almost kind of like a lazy ending, where you're like, but considering the point of view we were reading this book from, how would we not know that? This is something we technically should have known throughout the story, because we're seeing things from the perspective of someone who knows what's going on. That might have been spoilery. I apologize if you want to read that book, but it's not that good, so you're not missing out. It was just it wasn't really good, and it seems that in his next book people started to realize a bit more that he's not very good at writing female. Alright, sorry if this setup looks a little bit different. My phone storage got full, so I had to transfer all the videos over, and am now going to do a quick outro. So obviously we're just cutting this video short, kind of weird because I deleted a bunch of photos and I don't know how much space is on my phone. So pretty much those are 10 of my least favorite books that I've read. Obviously, I'm sorry if some of those are some of your favorites. No judgment if you like them. Maybe a little bit of judgment if you like The Cruel Prince, just because it's not it's an infuriating book. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Let me know down below what your least favorite book is, and do not just go to my favorites video and choose one of those to be mean, because I was mean in this video. But other